They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So, I guess I have to talk about the Jazz now. This is a team that has been pretty polarizing over the years, over their last couple, and then this season especially, where people are mixed on how they feel about this team and what the real ceiling for them is. And it's going to be tough to know for at least another little while, but what we can say is that they're one of the best teams in the league right now. Their record is sitting at 20-5. They've won 16 of their last 17 games, which is pretty freaking ridiculous when you really think about that, how many games that is and how consistent you have to be on a night-to-night basis to just pretty much be winning every single game. They did lose that one to the Denver Nuggets, but since then they haven't really lost since January 6th. So for about the past month, they have just been on a roll, won against everybody that they've been put up against, and they've been doing it convincingly. Not a lot of these have even been close games. They've been winning by 10, 15, 20 points. This is a good team, and they're rolling right now. And I kind of talked about this a couple of weeks ago in a video that I made about how quickly we need to adjust our expectations for certain teams, and how long we wait before labeling teams contenders, or do we have to see them do it in the playoffs? And the Jazz are kind of the poster child of that. And I kind of wanted to go into a couple of the reasons why the Jazz are winning and where I believe that they can actually go from here. So going into last season, a lot of people had the Jazz labeled as contenders for the title. For the most part, a lot of people were saying, hey, this team, made a lot of moves in order to get really good now. And they, I think, can actually, make some moves and potentially put themselves in that group of being a title contender. And that was last season. And a lot of that was due to the Mike Conley trade, because they bring in a guy who is probably like the best player in the league to never make an all-star team, right? He's like a very borderline all-star guy, but has always been a very solid point guard. If he had been in the Eastern Conference, he probably would have made the All-Star game a couple of times, but just playing in the West with the Grizzlies, he never quite got there. But yeah, like I said, a very solid point guard for a very long period of time. They bring him in, and he was disappointing last year. He didn't play very well, didn't shoot the ball well, didn't do all the normal Mike Conley things. And for me, a lot of that I chalked up to him being in a different place, being in a different system, because he had spent so long in Memphis, under the same system, the same grit and grind with a lot of the same teammates for that whole stretch. And he was playing one way, right? The Grizzlies were catering to his strengths, and he was doing the things that he was used to doing for, 10, 11, 12 seasons, however long he was there. And then he comes to the Jazz, and they're very different, they're very different there. He's never played with a guy like Donovan Mitchell. He never played with a guy like Rudy Gobert. At center, he always had Marc Gasol, who was not like a rim roller lob threat type of guy. He was a very different type of center. And so playing with Rudy Gobert, whose main offense comes through, cutting to the rim, cutting in the lane, getting those lobs, getting those, points in transition, all that stuff. So Conley and Gobert didn't really have their chemistry going. He didn't really have his chemistry going with Mitchell, and it just never really put it all together last year. They did at points. There was points where it's like, okay, we saw glimpses of this team, and this is what they can be. But for the most part, they didn't really get anything going until they were up 3-1 on the Nuggets in the bubble, and then, they blew it and collapsed and ended up losing that series. We all know how that went, right? And I think a lot of people actually forget that they were this close to, winning that Game 7. Conley put up a 3 that was like an inch too strong, and if he hits that, it's the Jazz in the second round against the Clippers instead of the Nuggets, and who knows what happens from there, right? That could, change a lot of things about the way the NBA has played out over the past year or so. But it's very interesting seeing Conley there with the Jazz playing well, and that has really unlocked them this season. He is leading the league, I believe, in plus minus when he's off the floor versus when he's on the court. It's some pretty staggering numbers there. It's like crazy. They're like plus 60, per 100 possessions or something like that. I don't know if that's true, but there's some crazy stat out there about Mike Conley. Whenever he's on the floor, the Jazz are killing everybody, and it's even more so than like when Mitchell's on the floor. His is not as high. Gobert's is not as high. It's Conley that's making this team run and making this engine go. Obviously, I don't think he's the best player on the team, but he has certainly been a very valuable player to them this year, because he's doing what we thought he was going to do last year. And other than that, it really is just pretty much the same team from last year. Like I said, I had talked about this before, but really the only change they made was bringing in Derek Favors. They inserted him into the rotation. And other than that, it's really nothing. Like they didn't make any big moves. It's still Mitchell, Conley, Gobert, Bogdanovich, Ingles, Jordan Clarkson, Royce O'Neal, George Niang. All those guys are still there, right? It's very much the same team from last season, just with Derek Favors in there now. And so, it's almost like nobody's ready to quite give them the credit that they probably deserve to this point. And I totally get it, because we saw what they looked like in the playoffs, right? Like, yes, I mentioned that they barely lost to that Nuggets team, but they did still lose. It was a first round exit for the Jazz. And had they gone up against the Clippers, who knows how that would have gone. But maybe let's say the Clippers do their same collapse that happened against the Nuggets. The Jazz end up beating the Clippers there. They go to the conference finals and get matched up against the Lakers. How differently would we be thinking about this team right now, right? Let's say they were in the conference finals against the Lakers instead of the Nuggets. We would probably be saying, hey, this Jazz team, they had a really good season last year and they're coming out of the gate really strong. Maybe it's time to really start considering them a contender. But because it was a first round exit, however slim of a margin it was still a first round exit. We're now thinking to ourselves, well, okay, like, yes, they can play as well as they want to, but nobody's really going to take them seriously until they prove they can do it in the playoffs. And that's something, I don't want to repeat myself too much from that video, but that's what a lot of people have been struggling with this Jazz start is how much of this is a mirage and how much of this is real. And that's where their next stretch comes in, because this upcoming schedule here is going to really let them know and let us as fans know where the Jazz kind of stack up in this whole championship chase. Because as you can see here, they've got the Bucks, Heat, Sixers, the Clippers on the road twice. You get a little bit of a break there with the Hornets, and then you go back, play the Lakers, and then at Miami. So those are all, very good teams. Like, yes, I know the Heat have been struggling, but I still think they're a good test for this Jazz team here. And they've got a lot of good teams up here. Now, let's be realistic about what the Jazz's schedule has looked like so far. It hasn't been the toughest in the world. They have a couple of quality wins to their name so far, but they haven't played a lot of games against really good teams. It has been quite an easy schedule so far. They've had a couple games against the Nuggets. They played the Warriors and blew them out. They have a win against the Clippers to their name, a win against the Bucks that kickstarted this win streak here, that convincing win against the Blazers on opening night. But other than that, it's been a lot of pretty mediocre teams. Like, you're talking like the Pelicans and the Knicks and the Hawks a couple of times. They played the Hornets. They played the Pacers and the Pistons, and like a lot of that win streak there was against some pretty league average teams, teams that are not necessarily expected to be title contenders. They're good teams, but not like title contending teams, right? Up next, there's a couple title contending teams. So we'll see, right? We'll see over their next, 2-3 weeks or so. If they come out of this in good shape, say they beat the Clippers here, they beat the Lakers, they beat, Philly, then I think you could start to get a lot of people really taking notice and saying, hey, the Jazz are actually for real. Because if they can get wins against all of these teams here, that's going to go a long way towards boosting their resume, and it's going to do a lot of convincing for guys like me who are like, hey, let's see them do it in the playoffs. Well, if they can do it against these really good teams, presuming that everybody's at full strength, then you're looking at a real title contender here, in my opinion. I think if they can convincingly, put together a nice stretch, win like 5 or 6 of these next games, then they're in really, really good shape here. So to me, this team has a feel similar to last year's Nuggets. Where they, we knew that they were going to be a good team. They have a young star. They have, a good quality roster here. They kind of, suffered a tough playoff loss the year before, and then they come back and everybody's playing together. They're playing connected. They're well coached. They know what they're doing, and they just all of a sudden are, putting themselves in one of those top seeds in their conference. Just like the Nuggets did last year when they kind of came out and set the world on fire. Jokic was kind of his coming out party. Jamal Murray had a big bubble showing, and they were for real, right? In the bubble, regardless of how their season ended against the Lakers, they were in the conference finals and they looked like they could have been a scary team, right? And so the Jazz, to me, are doing a similar thing this year, where they didn't really make that many changes to their roster, but all of a sudden they're playing a lot better basketball. And That could just be due to internal improvement. Could be guys, getting more used to their roles, like I mentioned with Conley. Donovan Mitchell has been awesome so far this season, averaging 23.5 points. He's played almost all the games, and he's doing it on good efficiency, and there's nothing you can knock about Donovan Mitchell's performance so far this year. Rudy Gobert has been his normal, defensive player of the year caliber self. And this is all with, Bogdanovich not having a great season. He's kind of come around over their last couple, but early on he was kind of struggling. And Joe Ingles is still doing his thing. And I mentioned, all that stuff about Conley and Jordan Clarkson off the bench has been awesome for them as well. So, a big shout out to all these guys who are really playing super well. But you still sort of have to wonder what the ceiling for this team is, right? Even if they do say, keep this win pace going for the rest of the season, they end up with the 1 seed or the 2 seed or whatever, go into the playoffs with home court advantage. They're playing really well. They're playing connected. When it comes time, when the playoffs roll around, even if, say, they have the best record in the league and they're in the conference finals against the Lakers, are you really going to bet against the Lakers in that series? Just saying. Like, as unfair as that might be to the Jazz, right? Like, say, like I said, have the best record in the league, beat everybody, get to the conference finals. As unfair as it might be to consider them the underdog there, I think a lot of people would, just simply because the Lakers have that proven track record. They won it last season. They have players who have been there before. And the Jazz, while, they have a lot of good guys on this roster, still feels like they're a little inexperienced and probably need a couple more years and maybe another move in order to bring somebody else in to really be a title contender. I don't want to be too critical of them because Jazz fans will come for me, and that's, it always happens, but it's annoying. But anyway, like I said, don't want to be too critical of the Jazz. They have played an awesome season so far. But, who, as unfair as it might be, to call them an underdog in any series against like the Clippers, the Lakers, or really any other Western Conference team, it might be fair, might not be. It's just kind of a have to wait and see thing. And I know that's it can be frustrating for people to have to wait so long to kind of crown a team and say, hey, they're actually a really good team, really good title contender. But I think that's honestly the better option here, just because we've seen it where teams have a really good regular season and then just don't play up to that same level when the playoffs roll around. I'm not saying that that's going to happen with the Jazz here, but it is something to monitor and something to, kind of be wary of. Anyway, I hope that didn't come off as a hater, because I don't want to be a Jazz hater, because I do like this team. I think they're fun to watch, and I've mentioned this before, but I do live in Utah. I have lots of close friends who are very big Jazz fans. I talk to them, weekly about whatever's going on with the Jazz. I'm very plugged into what's going on with the team, just because I have a lot of friends who do follow them so closely. And I think that is, the fact that we can't really be ready to call them a title threat yet. I think, most rational people would probably agree with me on that. A lot of Jazz fans are very excited about the way that this team is playing. And if they do continue to play at this level, then I absolutely do think that they will, be considered a title threat when the time comes. But I do think it's also fair to kind of just be a little bit patient with some of these things, considering that a lot of the other teams are not quite playing their best basketball right now. The Jazz are the hottest team in the league. They have played the best basketball so far this season, but that does not necessarily make them the best basketball team, But yeah, we'll see if they can keep it up. They've got a nice test over their next couple, and I think they're up for it. And we'll see how they emerge from this little whatever 5, 6, 7 game gauntlet they have upcoming here. But yeah, with all that said, I think that's about all I have on the Utah Jazz. So like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to. Leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the Jazz. Am I just being a hater? I don't know. Some people will probably think that I am, but whatever. Yeah, leave a comment letting me know what you think about the Jazz, and I'll see you guys in the next one.